There are a number of REST API clients which can be used to connect to a NetWorker server using REST API. For this example, we are using a tool called Postman, but any REST API client tool, plugin, or operating system commands such as curl can be used. To connect to the NetWorker server, we need to add the following two headers. Content type with the value application JSON, and accept with a value of application JSON. We will also need to enable basic authorization and enter the username and password of the NetWorker administrator account. These are the same credentials that you would use to log into the NetWorker Management Console or NetWorker Web User Interface. An optional header can be used to redirect the user authentication to a specified NetWorker authentication server. Typically, this is the same host as the NetWorker server. However, in some environments with multiple NetWorker server data zones, the NetWorker servers may be configured with user authentication on a specific NetWorker server. An example of this header is x-nw-authc-base-URL. In the value field, enter the fully qualified domain name or IP address of the NetWorker server. And this would be the NetWorker server where the authentication is configured. You also enter the authentication port, which by default is 9090. This header will instruct the REST API to use the authentication for the credentials you entered on the host specified instead of the NetWorker server that is specified in the URL. In this example, we will do a simple GET to the NetWorker server's REST API interface. As you can see, we've entered the NetWorker server's host name along with the authentication port 9090 and then / NetWorker REST API. You may need to disable SSL certificate verification from the REST API client, as you can see as I've done here. A status of 200 is returned indicating that it was successful, and we can see the various REST API endpoints. In most cases, you will use the latest version available, which currently is NetWorker or is version 3. We interact with the REST API through addresses called Uniform Resource Identifier, or URI. To connect to NetWorker and display resources, we can add global to the URI. A list of available NetWorker resources is shown. For example, we can list what's currently available in NetWorker's jobs database by adding jobs. All available endpoints are listed in the global URI. This returns that we have currently 39 jobs in the jobs database. We can query and filter information from this output by using the attributes and values shown in the URI endpoint. For example, we can query for jobs with completion statuses and then filter for client names and, in some cases, commands or messages, depending on what is available in that URI. You can do this by adding Q equals and then the attribute that you want to filter for. So in this case, completion status is equal to succeeded. And then if we wanted to add another query, we could do and Q equals type save job. And then to filter for specific information, we could do and FL equals client host name This has now returned the completed backup jobs along with their client host names. If you wanted to add additional information to the filter, you could do comma and then the other value you would like to be presented. When encountering REST API issues, there are a number of files you'll want to look at. When engaging support, collect these files along with system information. You'll also need to define the REST API function being performed. For example, a get, post, put, or delete REST API function, the URI used, so the full URI, any JSON body content when performing a put or post operation, the REST API response code, and any message returned when applicable. If you're using an external authentication host as described in the first part of this video, you'll need to also collect the authentication logs from that auth.c host. The system information can be provided using the NSR watch command on Linux or Windows NetWorker servers. From a root or admin command prompt, run the command NSR watch. Collect the server host name, the full NetWorker version including the build number, and the full operating system including its version. To exit this screen, hit Q. On Linux hosts, the logs required are under the following paths. For the auth.c authentication logs, look at NSR auth.c logs. The REST API logs are under NSR logs REST API. And the NetWorker service daemon.raw can also be useful. This is under NSR logs daemon.raw. On servers where runtime rendering is enabled, you will have a daemon.log. Provide both the daemon.raw and daemon.log. The daemon.log will be rendered in the server's local time zone. If only the daemon.raw is available, it will be rendered in the time zone of whichever server the raw file was rendered on. To collect the logs, you can run the following tar command. Tar cvzf, specify an output location. In this case, I'll place the bundle under the temp directory. You can use the following to generate the bundle with the host name and date along with the TGZ extension. Hostname underscore date dash capital I dot TGZ. Specify the path to the auth.c logs, NSR auth.c logs, the REST API logs, NSR logs REST API, and then the NetWorker server's daemon.raw. And again, you can also add the daemon.log if you have it. We will now have a bundle with the server's host name and date under the temp directory. On Windows servers, you can find the logs under the installation drive. In this case, the default location was used. C, Program Files, EMC Networker, NSR. The authentication server logs are under auth.c-server, Tomcat, logs. The REST API logs will be under NSR, logs, REST API. The NetWorker server's daemon.raw and .log file, when available, are under NSR, logs. For more complex issues, REST API debugging can be enabled. The debugging is applied in REST API's logback.xml file. The path of this file is under NSR, auth.c server, Tomcat, web apps, NW REST API, web-inf, classes. You can make a copy of the file, then modify the original file, and when no longer needed, you can revert the file back to the copy made. I'll be making the changes on a Linux server. However, the changes are the same regardless of the server's operating system. On Linux, the file is under nsr auth c web apps nw REST API web-inf classes and then logback.xml. Towards the end of the file, you'll see a section regarding the log levels. The supported log levels are error, warn, info, debug, and trace. Change the NW web API, nw.com, and nw.util lines to debug. Below this, you'll see a section that says, for API call logging, enable the following trace settings. To do this, you'll need to remove the close comment from the end of the block. You can move it to the end of this line here. Now you'll see that the web API request and web API response lines are uncommented, and you can leave them set to trace. For the Spring framework and jaxrs.provider lines, you can change these to debug. And the root level to debug. You do not need to restart NetWorker services. These changes will take effect immediately. To get debug logging, return to the REST API client, reproduce the error message performed. On the NetWorker server, you can open the REST API log and you'll see that trace and debug logging is enabled. To revert these settings, simply either go back to the file copy that you created, or modify the file and go back to less debug settings. You can create a zip of the files and engage support.